The vote had already been decided before anyone entered the chamber. David Reeves knew this the moment he saw the seating arrangements. 30 cycles of diplomatic service had taught him to read a room, and this one screamed setup. The assembly hall stretched upward like a canyon carved from crystal and light. Delegates from 200 species filled the tiered seats, their forms ranging from the elegant Valorians in their flowing silver robes to the hulking Tanish with their stone-like skin. Humanity held exactly 12 seats out of 2,000. The math alone told the story. David adjusted his translation earpiece and took his designated spot in the lower tier. His assistant, Amy Chen, slid into the seat beside him. She had been with the diplomatic corps for 8 years, sharp enough to spot trouble before it announced itself. "Something feels wrong," she whispered. "The Valorian delegation is twice its normal size." David nodded slightly. The Valorians rarely brought their full contingent unless they planned to make a statement. High Chancellor Maris stood at the central podium, his crystalline features catching the light in ways that made him seem almost divine. 10,000 years of galactic leadership had given the Valorians an aura of untouchable authority. "We gather today to address concerns regarding human expansion," Maris announced. His voice carried perfectly through the chamber without amplification. "Reports indicate unauthorized technological development in 3 human colonies." David felt his stomach tighten. The colonies in question had been building improved water purification systems and agricultural equipment, hardly weapons of mass destruction. A Valorian security officer projected images above the assembly. Grainy footage showed human engineers working on what looked like industrial machinery. The narration painted a picture of military buildup and treaty violations. "This is absurd," David said, activating his speaking console. "Those facilities produce farming equipment. We submitted development permits 2 years ago." "Permits that were never approved," Maris replied smoothly. "Human expansion must follow proper protocols for your own protection." That phrase again, "for your own protection." David had heard it hundreds of times since humanity joined the assembly 50 years ago. It prefaced every restriction, every limitation, every barrier placed in humanity's path. The vote proceeded exactly as expected. The assembly imposed new restrictions on human technological development. No advanced manufacturing without Valorian oversight. No independent space exploration beyond designated zones. No military vessels larger than patrol craft. 200 species voted to limit one. Only the Tanish abstained. After the session ended, David gathered his notes with mechanical precision. Anger would accomplish nothing here. He had learned that lesson early. "Ambassador Reeves," a Tanish delegate approached, his massive frame blocking the aisle. Gregor was ancient by any species standards, his rocky features worn smooth by centuries of experience. "Walk with me." They moved through the station's observation corridor, a transparent tunnel that offered views of the void beyond. Ships came and went in ordered patterns, a ballet of galactic commerce and cooperation. "You have been played," Gregor said without preamble, "as have 16 species before you." David stopped walking. "What are you talking about?" Gregor pulled a small data chip from his diplomatic pouch. "I am old enough to remember the Kelhan integration, promising species, advanced biotechnology. The Valorians protected them too. Within 100 years, the Kelhan lost their homeworld to a convenient plague. The Valorians inherited their research." "You're suggesting the Valorians deliberately sabotaged them." "I am stating it as fact." Gregor pressed the chip into David's hand. "The Brixa Collective, the Yoran Empire, the Drellin Confederacy before their reformation, all followed the same pattern: integration, restriction, extraction, elimination." David's mind raced. The implications were staggering. "Why tell me this now?" "Because humanity is next on the schedule. I estimate you have 5 years before they manufacture a crisis that justifies taking direct control of Earth." Gregor's stone face somehow conveyed deep sadness. "I failed to save the others. Perhaps I can help save you." David returned to his quarters in a daze. Amy was already there, her workstation displaying complex data streams. "You need to see this," she said without greeting. "I've been tracking that suspicious data package that got routed to your console by mistake last week. I finally cracked the encryption." She pulled up file after file. Communications between Valorian officials discussing human suppression strategies. Technical schematics showing how human designs were altered to fail after certain thresholds. Detailed plans for false flag operations to discredit human colonies. "They've been doing this since first contact," Amy said, her voice hollow. "Every major human invention that reached the assembly was either stolen or had its military applications stripped out. Our shipyard designs, our medical advances, our AI research, all compromised." David inserted Gregor's chip into the console. More files appeared, these ones historical, species after species, each following the same tragic arc. Integration, exploitation, destruction. "We need to get this to Earth," David said. "To the colonies, to anyone who will listen." Alarms screamed through the station before Amy could respond. Emergency broadcasts flooded every channel. A terrorist attack had struck the Assembly's main power core. Early reports blamed human extremists. David and Amy exchanged looks of pure understanding. The Valorians were moving faster than Gregor predicted. "We need to run," Amy said, already purging her workstation. "Right now." David grabbed the data chips and whatever else he could carry. 50 years of diplomatic progress had just collapsed into ashes. But in those ashes lay the truth, and truth was the most dangerous weapon humanity had ever possessed. They had minutes at best before Valorian security arrived. The real war was about to begin, and humanity did not even know it yet. Smoke filled the corridors as David and Amy ran. Emergency lighting painted everything in shades of red and shadow. Behind them, Valorian security forces spread through the station like a virus, sealing every exit and checking every identity. "The transport bay is compromised," Amy said, checking her handheld scanner. "So are docking ports 1 through 7. David's lungs burned as they ducked into a maintenance shaft. The data chips felt like lead weights in his pocket. Information that could topple 10,000 years of Valorian control, and they were trapped with it. "There," Amy pointed to a service hatch. "The waste disposal system connects to external maintenance pods, not glamorous but unmonitored." They squeezed through passages meant for maintenance drones. Grease and grime covered everything. David's diplomatic uniform would never recover, not that it mattered anymore. Ambassadors did not become fugitives unless the entire system had. Rotted from within. The maintenance pod was barely large enough for both of them. Amy hotwired the launch sequence while David sealed the hatch. Through the small viewport, he watched security teams sweep past their position, searching for 2 humans who supposedly did not exist in this section. "Hold on," Amy warned. The pod shot away from Providence Station with all the grace of a rock thrown from a slingshot. No inertial dampeners in these things. David's stomach tried to exit through his throat. "Where are we going?" he managed to ask. "The Crossroads, neutral trading hub in the Veil Nebula. Valorian authority is weak there. We can hide and figure out our next move." The pod's autopilot was basic but functional. 3 days of cramped travel lay ahead. David used the time to review the data chips again and again. The evidence was overwhelming. 17 species manipulated over millennia. 3 of them no longer existed. The Valorians had not just corrupted the assembly, they had weaponized it. "What about your family?" David asked on the second day. The question had been eating at him. Amy stared at the viewport, watching stars drift past. "My parents are on Mars colony. Brother works on a mining station near Jupiter. I sent them a coded message before we left, told them to be ready to move if things got bad." "Things are already bad. They're going to get worse." The Crossroads appeared on their 3rd day of travel. It looked more like a junkyard than a station. Hundreds of ships clustered around a central hub that had been built and rebuilt so many times that no original structure remained visible. This was where the galaxy's misfits gathered, where laws bent like light around a black hole. They docked without ceremony. No customs checks, no identity scans. Credits bought silence here, and David had enough emergency funds to purchase what they needed. The main marketplace assaulted the senses. Creatures of every description haggled in a dozen languages. The smell of cooking food mixed with engine exhaust and things David could not identify. Amy kept her hand near the small plasma cutter she had grabbed from the pod. "You look lost," the voice came from behind them. Gregor stood there, somehow having materialized from the crowd. "Good, lost humans last longer than confident ones." "How did you know we would come here?" David asked. "Because I sent you the station coordinates in my data package along with my contact information." Gregor gestured toward a side passage. "Come, we should not talk in the open." His quarters were modest but secure. Shielded walls prevented electronic surveillance. The old Tanish poured 3 glasses of something that glowed faintly blue. "To the fallen," Gregor said, raising his glass, "and to those who refused to join them." The liquid tasted like burnt metal and regret. David forced it down. "I have been watching the Valorians for 400 years, Gregor said. "Since they destroyed the Kelhin. I was young then, new to the assembly. I believed their lies about plague and unfortunate circumstances. By the time I understood the truth, the Kelhin were gone." "Why didn't you expose them?" Amy asked. "I tried 3 times. Each time the evidence disappeared. Witnesses died in accidents. My own credibility was attacked. The Valorians are very good at protecting their secrets." Gregor tapped the data chip David had set on the table. "This is different. This is their own internal communications. This cannot be dismissed as conspiracy theory." "They'll still try," David said. "Of course, but you have something they cannot fight. You have time and numbers. The Kelhin had 12 billion when the Valorians struck. Humans have 30 billion across dozens of worlds. You are too big to erase quietly." Amy leaned forward. "So what do we do?" "Build a network, other restricted species, independent traders, sympathetic delegates, anyone who has suffered under Valorian control or fears they might be next." Gregor pulled up a holographic map showing systems across the galaxy. "I have contacts in 40 locations. We start there." Over the following weeks, David and Amy became ghosts. They moved from station to station, making contact with Gregor's network. Each meeting revealed new horrors. A Brixa engineer who watched her species' shipyards get sabotaged. A Kelhin survivor who had hidden her identity for decades. A human colony administrator who discovered Valorian agents replacing medical supplies with placebos. The network grew. 50 members became 100. 100 became 500. They shared information, coordinated safe houses, and began planning something that seemed impossible. Resistance. Amy set up an encrypted communication system using old human technology the Valorians had banned decades ago. Ironically, that same ban meant they had stopped monitoring it. "We have a message coming in," Amy said late one night. "Military encryption. Source is the Assembly Defense Fleet." David's heart raced as he decoded the message. It came from Admiral Grace Holland, the highest-ranking human in galactic military service. The message was short. "I know the truth. I have known for 3 years. I have been waiting for someone to make the first move. Tell me what you need." David looked at Amy, then at Gregor. The old Tanish smiled, something that looked alarming on his stone features. "We have our general," David said. The asteroid field known as the Graves had earned its name from the dead civilization that once lived there. Broken ships and shattered habitats floated in eternal silence, remnants of a species that had disappeared before the Valorians rose to power. Now the Graves served a new purpose. David floated in zero gravity, watching crews retrofit an ancient facility buried inside the largest asteroid. 3 months had passed since their first contact with Admiral Holland. 3 months of constant movement, secret meetings, and building something that should not exist. A resistance. Structural integrity is holding, reported Paul, a young engineer from Earth's orbital shipyards. He was barely 25 but possessed an instinct for improvisation that came from years of working with sabotaged equipment. We can have manufacturing operational in 2 weeks. Amy drifted up beside David. We have 40 confirmed safe locations now. Network spans 12 sectors. The Kelhin remnants want to join us. So do 3 Brixa colonies. How many total? 200,000 individuals, not all fighters. Scientists, engineers, logistics people, families. Amy's expression darkened. The Valorians annexed 2 more human colonies yesterday, called it protective custody due to increased extremist threats. David had expected that. The false flag attack on Providence Station had been just the beginning. Every week brought new restrictions, new annexations, new disappearances. The Valorians were accelerating their timeline. Admiral Holland arrived at the graves on a small patrol ship that officially did not exist. She moved through the converted facility with military precision, her gray uniform making her stand out among the mismatched civilian clothes everyone else wore. "Impressive," she said, examining the manufacturing equipment. Paul's team had assembled. "This is all human design." "Original human design," Paul corrected. "Before the Valorians modified our specifications, we found the archived blueprints buried in old data cores. Turns out our ancestors were building ships twice as fast with half the resources until the assembly imposed safety standards." Holland ran her hand along a fabrication unit. "I have been sneaking supplies from fleet depots for 2 years, storing them in dead zones and forgotten stations. Weapons, ship components, medical equipment, enough to outfit a small fleet." "How many ships can you bring us?" David asked. 40, maybe 50 if I time it right. Not much against Valorian military strength, but enough to make a statement. Holland's jaw tightened. "I have 7,000 crew members who suspect the truth. Most have seen the supply manifests that do not add up. Equipment sent to human colonies that never arrives. Requisitions that disappear. They are waiting for proof." David handed her a data chip. "Everything we have. Valorian communications, historical records, financial trails. Proof that they have been systematically destroying species for 10,000 years. Holland pocketed the chip without looking at it. "I will need time to position my forces, 2 months minimum." "We may not have 2 months. Then we make the time." The manufacturing operation came online ahead of schedule. Paul and his team worked with an intensity born from decades of suppressed innovation. Human engineers had been designing improvements to assembly technology in their heads for years, forbidden from implementing them. Now those ideas poured forth like water from a broken dam. "Look at this," Paul said, showing David a sleek device the size of a briefcase. "Personal shield generator. We have been telling the assembly this was impossible for 20 years because our power cells supposedly could not handle the load. Turns out our power cells were designed to fail at exactly the threshold needed." "How long to produce them in quantity?" "Already started. We will have 5,000 units in 3 weeks. Similar breakthroughs happened daily. Faster-than-light drives that actually achieved their theoretical maximum. Weapons that did not burn out after a dozen shots. Communications equipment that could not be jammed by Valorian protocols. But darker news arrived with each passing day. Gregor reported that 15,000 humans had disappeared from the annexed colonies. Sent to labor camps on Valorian worlds, their families told they were undergoing re-education. Amy confirmed that 3 human research stations had been destroyed by supposed accidents. "This is the pattern," Gregor said during a strategy meeting. "The Valorians are preparing the galaxy to accept humanity's removal, first the terrorist attacks, then the annexations for your own protection. Next comes the discovery of some threat that requires quarantine. Finally, tragedy strikes and humans simply cease to exist." "How long?" David asked. The Kelhin had 6 months from annexation to extinction. You have been under annexation protocols for 4 months. 2 months left, maybe less. David called an emergency assembly of the network leadership. 40 people gathered in the Graves Command Center, representing a dozen species and twice as many worlds. We cannot wait any longer, David said. The Valorians are moving toward genocide. We need to act now. Act how? Asked a Brixa representative. We are 200,000 against an empire of trillions. We hit them where it hurts. Supply depots, communication hubs, weapons facilities, simultaneous strikes across 20 systems. We force them to spread their forces thin. David displayed a tactical map. And we broadcast everything. Every piece of evidence, every crime, every lie. We make sure the entire galaxy sees what the Valorians really are. They will crush us, someone said. Probably, David agreed. But we make them work for it. And while they are busy crushing us, the galaxy will be watching. The Valorians have maintained control through illusion. We shatter that illusion. Admiral Holland stood. I can have 60 ships ready in 3 weeks. I have been reviewing the tactical situation. The Valorians are powerful, but they have not fought a real war in 5,000 years. They rely on overwhelming force and technological superiority. If we use guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run strikes, distributed command structures, we can hurt them. Votes were called, arguments were made. In the end, the decision was unanimous. The resistance would strike in 20 days. David returned to his small quarters after the meeting. Amy was already there, reviewing target packages and attack vectors. We are really doing this, she said. We are really doing this. A lot of us are going to die. I know. Amy looked up from her work. Worth it. David thought about the disappeared thousands, the destroyed species, the 10,000 years of lies. Worth it. 0 hour arrived on a Tuesday. David had always found that detail absurd. The day that would determine whether humanity survived or died fell on an ordinary Tuesday. All strike teams report ready, Amy said from her communications station. The Graves Command Center hummed with activity as 200,000 people across the galaxy prepared to commit treason against the oldest power in known space. David opened the channel that connected all resistance cells. This is David Reeves. In 10 minutes we change everything. The Valorians have controlled the galaxy through fear and deception for 10,000 years. Today we show them that fear is a weapon that cuts both ways. For the Kelhin, for the Brixa, for the Yoran, for every species they destroyed and every species they plan to destroy. For humanity, strike now. 60 ships under Admiral Holland's command dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Their target was the Valorian supply depot at Helix Station, a massive facility that serviced a quarter of the Valorian fleet. Holland stood on her bridge, surrounded by crew members who had made the hardest choice of their lives. All batteries, fire at will. Let them know humans are done asking for permission. Human weapons, built to original specifications without Valorian modifications, tore through Helix Station's shields like they were made of paper. Explosions rippled across the structure as fuel reserves ignited and ammunition stores cooked off. Similar scenes played out across 20 systems. Resistance cells struck weapons facilities, communication hubs, and military outposts. The attacks were coordinated with precision the Valorians had not seen in millennia. At the same time, every major communication network in the galaxy received an overwhelming data burst. Gregor had spent weeks preparing the delivery system. Now it activated, broadcasting the evidence of Valorian crimes to billions of beings. Historical records of species manipulation, financial data showing resource theft, communications detailing planned genocides, security footage of labor camps, scientific reports on biological weapons, 10,000 years of evil exposed in 10,000 different ways. The galaxy reacted with stunned confusion. Many refused to believe it. The Valorians were the founders of peace, the architects of unity. This had to be propaganda. but others recognized the truth immediately. Species that had always felt something was wrong with the assembly, traders who had watched supply chains that made no sense, scientists who had noticed their breakthrough discoveries getting classified and forgotten. The Valorian response was swift and brutal. High Chancellor Maris appeared on every channel, his crystalline features arranged in righteous fury. These lies are the work of human extremists and their co-conspirators. This terrorist network has murdered thousands of innocent beings and now seeks to destroy the peace we have maintained for millennia. The Valorian fleet will restore order and eliminate this threat. 500 Valorian warships mobilized. The largest military force assembled in 5,000 years, all aimed at one species. David watched the tactical display with a sinking feeling. 60 ships against 500. The math was brutal. First engagement at Helix Station, Amy reported. Holland's fleet is withdrawing. She lost 4 ships but inflicted major damage on the depot. Other strike teams. Mixed results. We destroyed 7 targets completely, damaged 12 more, but we lost 18 ships total and 30 ground teams are pinned down. The Valorian counterattack was overwhelming. Their ships were faster and better armed, but something strange started happening. Human commanders used tactics the Valorians had never encountered. Instead of standing and fighting, they hit and ran. Instead of defending fixed positions, they scattered and regrouped. Instead of following predictable command structures, every ship operated with frightening independence. Admiral Holland led a daring raid on a Valorian command carrier, the ship that coordinated fleet movements in the Outer Reach sector. Her forces jumped in, disabled the carrier's engines with surgical strikes, and jumped out before the defending fleet could respond. Without that carrier, 50 Valorian ships lost their coordination and became easy targets for resistance ambushes. "We are fighting like humans," Holland told her officers. "No honor, no formations, no rules, we fight to win." The war spread like fire. Species that had been under Valorian restriction for centuries saw the evidence and rose in rebellion. The Brixa Collective openly declared independence. 3 Kelhan survivor colonies attacked Valorian installations. Minor species the galaxy had barely noticed suddenly became problems the Valorians could not ignore. The Galactic Assembly fell into chaos. Half the delegates supported the Valorians. The other half demanded investigation. Some species tried to remain neutral. Others saw opportunity in the collapse of order. Then the Drellin announced they would investigate the evidence. The Drellin were older than even the Valorians, mysterious beings who rarely involved themselves in galactic affairs. Their word carried absolute weight because they had no political agenda and nothing to gain from lies. For 3 weeks, the Drellin examined every piece of evidence. They interviewed witnesses. They audited financial records. They compared historical accounts with physical evidence. During those 3 weeks, the war ground on. Holland's forces grew as more assembly ships defected. Paul's engineers produced new weapons and equipment at a staggering pace. David coordinated resistance cells across 100 worlds. The casualties mounted on both sides. Thousands dead, entire stations destroyed, planets blockaded. Finally, the Drellin delivered their verdict. "We have reviewed the evidence presented against the Valorian leadership. We have confirmed its authenticity through methods that cannot be falsified. The charges are accurate. The Valorians have engaged in systematic manipulation, exploitation, and genocide of 17 species over 10,000 years. We call for immediate removal of Valorian authority and criminal proceedings against those responsible." The galaxy held its breath. High Chancellor Maris appeared on every screen, his perfect features twisted with something that looked almost like fear. "The Drellin have been deceived by clever lies. The Valorian people will never surrender our rightful place. We declare total war against humanity and any species that supports them. This is a fight for civilization itself. Either the Valorians maintain order or chaos consumes everything." 500 Valorian ships became 800. They pulled vessels from defensive positions, called in reserves, and mobilized their full might. The message was clear. The Valorians would rather burn the galaxy than admit defeat. David stared at the tactical display showing 800 enemy ships. The Resistance had maybe 200 now, with all the defections. "We hurt them," Amy said quietly. "That is something." "That is everything," David replied. 3 months into total war and the galaxy was burning. David reviewed casualty reports that turned his stomach. 20,000 Resistance fighters dead, 15 human colonies under siege, 50 million civilians displaced across a dozen species. But the Valorians were bleeding too. "Latest intelligence from Admiral Holland," Amy said, pulling up tactical data. "The Valorian fleet has lost 90 ships. Their supply lines are stretched across too many fronts. Species are rebelling in 60 systems." David studied the map. Red markers showed Valorian strength, blue showed Resistance forces, and yellow showed active rebellions. The galaxy looked like it had a disease spreading through it. "We cannot win a straight fight," Gregor said. The old Tanish had become their strategic advisor, his centuries of experience proving invaluable. "But we do not need to. We just need to survive long enough for the Valorians to collapse under their own weight." Paul entered the command center, covered in grease and looking exhausted. "New toys are ready. Adaptive combat AI and stealth systems. The AI learns enemy tactics in real time and adjusts. The stealth tech uses a trick the Valorians taught us by accident when they sabotaged our sensor arrays." "How many units?" David asked. "Enough to outfit our entire fleet. Holland wants to test them at New Canberra." New Canberra was a human agricultural colony under Valorian blockade. 200,000 civilians were trapped there, slowly starving as the Valorians tightened the noose. It was one of dozens of similar situations across human space. Admiral Holland's fleet arrived at New Canberra using the new stealth systems. The Valorian blockade fleet of 40 ships never saw them coming. Human vessels appeared as if materializing from nothing, their adaptive combat AI predicting and countering every Valorian defense. The battle lasted 30 minutes. The Valorians lost all 40 ships. Holland lost 3. News of the victory spread through Resistance networks like lightning. For months they had been losing, surviving through clever tactics and desperation. Now they were winning. The Valorians grew desperate. They attempted to deploy weapons that had been banned since the Assembly's founding, planet-killing devices designed to crack worlds and boil atmospheres. Human intelligence operatives intercepted the weapons convoy at the Edge Nebula. Amy coordinated the operation personally, directing 3 strike teams through a maze of defensive positions. "Target acquired," reported the lead team. "These things are worse than the reports suggested. They are not just weapons, they are extinction devices." "Secure them," Amy ordered. "Do not let a single one escape." The strike teams captured all 12 planet killers. They also captured the Valorian officers transporting them, along with complete technical specifications and deployment orders. The galaxy reacted with horror when the evidence was broadcast. Even Valorian allies could not justify weapons designed to murder entire worlds. The ancient ban on such devices was the one law every species agreed upon. Species that had remained neutral suddenly chose sides. The Tanish Collective formally recognized the Resistance. The Brixa declared war on the Valorians. Minor species that had been too afraid to move now found their courage. The Valorian position deteriorated rapidly. Their fleet was overstretched, their supplies were dwindling, and their allies were abandoning them. High Chancellor Maris made increasingly frantic broadcasts about protecting civilization from chaos. But the galaxy was learning a new truth. The chaos they feared was nothing compared to the order the Valorians had maintained through genocide. Admiral Holland pressed the advantage. Her forces had grown to nearly 300 ships as more assembly vessels defected. She conducted a brilliant campaign in the core systems, destroying Valorian supply depots and communications infrastructure. "We are winning," she told David during a strategy meeting. "Actually winning. 6 months ago, I would have said this was impossible." David felt the weight of that statement. Winning meant something beyond survival. It meant humanity would have a future. So would the Brixa, the Kelhin remnants, and every other species the Valorians had targeted. But winning came with a price. The war had killed hundreds of thousands. Entire regions of space were now contested battlegrounds. Trade had collapsed. Food shortages affected billions. "The Valorians are gathering their remaining fleet," Gregor reported. 800 ships converging on their throne world. They are preparing a final stand. David studied the tactical situation. The resistance could field maybe 400 ships if they pulled every available vessel. The math was still against them. "We need to coordinate with the other rebel forces," Amy suggested. "The Brixa, the Tanish, the independent colonies, if we combine our strength." "Already working on it," David said. "I have been in contact with 30 species. Everyone who has suffered under Valorian rule, everyone who fears becoming the next target." The coalition came together faster than anyone expected. Species that had never cooperated before found common purpose in opposing the Valorians. Ancient grudges were set aside. Territorial disputes were postponed. The need to survive overrode everything else. 2 months after the Planet Killer incident, a fleet of 800 ships gathered in neutral space. 30 species were represented. Admiral Holland commanded the human contingent. Other species brought their own leaders, their own tactics, their own reasons for fighting. "We hit them together," Holland told the assembled commanders. "One final battle. The Valorians have ruled through fear and division. We end them through unity." The Valorian throne world was called Meridian, a gleaming jewel of a planet that had stood as the center of galactic authority for 10,000 years. The Valorian defense fleet waited in orbit, 800 ships arranged in perfect formations. High Chancellor Maris broadcast one final message. "The Valorians will never surrender. We built this civilization. We maintained the peace. If we fall, chaos will consume everything. Better the galaxy burn than fall into the hands of savages." Admiral Holland responded with actions rather than words. 800 coalition ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in attack formation. The Battle of Meridian began. It was the largest space battle in recorded history. 2 fleets of equal size clashed in orbit around a planet that represented everything the Valorians had built. Thousands of lives hung in the balance. Billions more watched from across the galaxy. For 3 days the battle raged. Ships burned and died on both sides. Tactics evolved hour by hour as commanders adapted to changing situations. Human guerrilla strategies mixed with Brixa defensive formations and Tanish aggressive assaults. On the 4th day, the Valorian line broke. Their ships scattered, their formations collapsed, their will to fight. Shattered against an enemy that refused to surrender despite impossible odds. High Chancellor Maris and the Valorian leadership were captured trying to flee in a diplomatic yacht. Victory tasted like ash and smoke. David stood in what remained of the assembly hall, now on a different station since Providence had been destroyed in the war's opening days. Reconstruction crews worked constantly, but no amount of repair could erase what had happened here. 18 months had passed since the first shots were fired. The final casualty count made David sick. 2 million beings dead across 30 species. 15 worlds scarred by orbital bombardment. Hundreds of stations destroyed. Trillions of credits in damage. But the galaxy was free. "The tribunal has reached its verdict," announced the Drellin judge. High Chancellor Maris and 47 other Valorian officials stood in containment fields, their perfect crystalline features somehow diminished by shame. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit genocide, systematic manipulation of 17 species, murder of billions, theft of resources on a galactic scale, crimes against sapient life. Maris did not flinch. We maintained order. The galaxy was stable under our rule. Look what your precious freedom has brought. War, death, chaos. You maintained control through murder, the judge replied. That is not order, that is tyranny. The sentence is exile. You will spend the remainder of your lives in isolation, unable to harm another being. It was a light sentence considering the crimes, but the galaxy was tired of blood. Exile would have to be enough. The reformed Galactic Assembly met for the first time in the restored chamber. 200 species sent delegates, but the atmosphere was different now. The tiered seating was gone, replaced by a circular arrangement. No species sat above another. David Reeves had been elected chancellor, a position he had never wanted. He looked out at the assembled delegates and saw fear, hope, suspicion, and exhaustion in equal measure. We have torn down an empire that stood for 10,000 years, he began. We did it because that empire was built on bones and lies, but destruction is easy. Building something better is harder. He activated a display showing the new assembly charter. No species may restrict another's development. No species may interfere in another's governance without invitation. No species may maintain military forces sufficient to threaten others. These rules apply to everyone equally. How do we enforce this? Asked a Brixa delegate. Without a strong central authority who prevents the next Valorian. We do, David said simply. All of us. Admiral Holland is establishing the Multi-Species Defense Initiative, not a fleet controlled by one species, but units contributed by many. No single species will have enough military power to dominate, but together we can defend against threats. Admiral Holland stood from her seat. The MSDI will be transparent in all operations. Every species contributes. Every species has oversight. We learned what happens when power concentrates in one group. We will not make that mistake again. The debate continued for days. Species that had been enemies worked together to create something new. It was messy and loud and frustrating. Democracy always was. But it was also beautiful. Paul and his team of engineers were already working on the next challenge. 17 species had been suppressed by the Valorians, their technological development deliberately stunted. Now they needed help catching up. We found descendants of the Yoran, Paul told David. 2 colonies hidden in deep space. They have been isolated for 3,000 years. Their technology is centuries behind. Can we help them? Already started. It turns out humans are really good at accelerating technological development when we are not being sabotaged. Paul grinned. Funny how that works. Similar projects were underway across the galaxy, species helping species. Knowledge shared freely instead of hoarded. The Valorians had maintained control by keeping everyone separate and weak. The new assembly would build strength through cooperation. Amy coordinated relief efforts for war-torn regions. Food, medicine, construction materials, billions of beings needed help. The logistics were staggering. We are going to make mistakes, she told David late one night. This is too big, too complex. We cannot fix everything. We do not have to fix everything. We just have to do better than the Valorians. David looked at the star map showing reconstruction zones. And we are. No genocide, no suppression, just species helping each other survive. Gregor announced his retirement. 400 years of fighting, the Valorians had taken their toll. I can rest now, he told David. The Kelhan are avenged. The pattern is broken. Other young fools can handle the galaxy from here. You are not that old. Gregor's laugh sounded like rocks grinding together. I am ancient by any measure, but I will die satisfied. The galaxy is better than it was. That is all anyone can ask. 6 months after the Battle of Meridian, the Assembly held a memorial ceremony. 2 million names were read aloud, one for each being who died in the war. It took 3 days. David stood before the memorial wall after the ceremony ended. His name was there, along with everyone who had fought. But so were the names of beings who had simply been in the wrong place when the war came to them. Regrets? Amy asked, standing beside him. Thousands, we started a war that killed millions. The Valorians started that war 10,000 years ago. We just finished it. Does that make it better? It makes it necessary. Amy touched the memorial wall. These people died for something real, freedom, truth, the right to exist without someone else deciding your fate. That matters. David thought about the road ahead. Rebuilding would take decades. Trust between species would take centuries. There would be conflicts, setbacks, failures. But there would also be hope. He turned to face the assembly chamber, visible through the observation window. Delegates argued and debated and slowly built consensus. It was chaotic and inefficient and absolutely necessary. "Ready to get back to work?" Amy asked. David smiled for the first time in weeks. The galaxy needs a chancellor, apparently. The galaxy needs someone who remembers what we fought for, what we lost, what we gained. They walked back toward the assembly chamber together. Behind them, the memorial wall caught the light from a nearby star, 2 million names reflecting hope and sorrow in equal measure. One act of treachery had exposed 10,000 years of evil. And in fighting that evil, humanity and their allies had claimed something more valuable than power. They had claimed their freedom, their future, and their right to stand as equals among the stars. The galaxy would never be perfect, but it would be theirs.